Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you an extra video this week, and this is part 1 of my reading wrap up for the month of April. In April I did my 30 books in 30 days challenge, which I vlogged the whole way through, and I finished 32 books, which is a lot to talk about in one video, so I decided to split it in two. The books were in no particular order, they never really are in my wrap up, and let's get right down to this first lot of books. Oh, and I'll have content warnings for all of the books in the description box below, all of the content warnings that I could think of. The first book I want to talk about is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, and I buddy read this one with my good friend in real life, and this one follows Chloe Brown, who is a black, chronically ill and plus-sized main character, and she's in a near car crash incident and she sees her life flash before her eyes and she decides her life is not all that thrilling. So she makes a list of things that she needs to do to get a life, and along the way she meets Red, who is someone who works at her apartment block, and he helps her with her get a life list. This was an adorable romance. I really liked it. As far as me and my friend could understand, my friend has the same disability as Chloe Brown. She thought the disability representation was on point and really good, and that the plus size representation was also really good, and I just really liked Chloe. I think she was a great character, so believable with the depth that she has, with the way that she is feeling a lot of pain from some of the ableism that she's experienced in her life, but also is trying to move forwards. Such a wonderful character to follow. And I also really liked Red, a male love interest, because he was just the sweetest person, but he was also struggling a lot with self-love. It was good to see so many things in this book. We get to see, of course, the brilliant representations I already talked about, but we also see a positive therapy experience, especially when it relates to a male character. I feel like we don't get to see that too much. We also see an abusive relationship from the perspective of it happening to a male character. Again, something that I just don't read that much about. I loved Smudge the cat in this book. I think she has the most attitude and I adored that about Smudge. The only thing that didn't vibe with me with this book is the steamy scenes. I've talked about this a little bit, but I just want to say, I'm not going to say what the steamy scenes were or where they happened because I don't want to give any spoilers, but any of the steamy scenes that we get to read do not happen at home in a comfortable bed. That's all I'm going to say. They just don't happen in a comfortable bed at home scenario. And you know, I love those kind of steamy scenes. I love the basic, simple, homely ones, and we didn't get any of those. And at least if they did happen, we didn't get to see them on page, which is why where the scenes actually ended up happening weren't particularly my cup of tea. I do like a steamy scene, like the next person, like the next new adult romance reader. But yeah, it would have been nice to see some more happen at home. However, I really recommend this series. The sisters in this one were great, and I cannot wait to continue reading and find out more about the rest of the characters and their romances. Then I read The Deep by Rivers Solomon, and this one is about intergenerational trauma, and it's about these mer people, kind of, who have evolved from the pregnant women who were thrown over the sides of slave ships. And in this one you have one person who holds all of the memories for all of the people, because the memories are so much suffering and such a burden to carry, and every now and again she shares these memories with the rest of the people so they can remember who they are. But this burden of carrying the weight of memories is really plaguing our main character, and I really like this book. I think it's very much a character driven story and a thematically driven story. I was very much impressed with how it handled the topic of memory, but especially traumatic memory, how important it is, especially in terms of Black history, because that's one of the main focuses here, how important it is to remember it and hold it within you and not drown in all the suffering and pain of the past, but also to not forget it as you're moving forwards. And it handled that topic and showed the depth of it and delved into it so very well. I also liked our main character, and I liked the main character's Amara or mother character. I thought that relationship was very interesting. I will say that I didn't connect too much to the characters, but I feel like it's because they were so alien and so otherworldly, and that was done so very well. There were some discussions here about gender and love, but also just about culture, language, memory. It was all tied in very nicely. I was very impressed, and I think if you like reading about themes, you're really going to enjoy this one, and I will read more by Rivers Solomon for sure. Up next, I read Love is a Revolution by Renee Watson, and this is a young adult contemporary book where we follow Nala, our main character, and she goes to a political activist event and she sees a guy there that she really likes, and she decides to lie about who she is and make herself seem more politically activist than she is so that she can win this guy over. But perhaps in the process of all of this lying, she needs to find out how to love not only herself but the people around her equally as much. And I really enjoyed this book. I think I got off to a bit of a rocky start with this one because our main character is lying and there's a lot of deception going on, which is very hard to process, and I felt like in the beginning the characters felt very shallow, and I wasn't for that. But the reason why they're so shallow and the reason why they're making so many mistakes is so that they can develop over the course of this novel, and they definitely do, especially Nala as a main character. I loved seeing the process of her development. I loved how it had ups and downs and how some things became very quickly clear to her and apparent, but others took a bit more time. You get to see teenage characters interacting with elderly characters, which is something I always find so heartwarming to read about and see in real life. And I also was very much intrigued by the complex family dynamic and how that was all handled. The discussions around that, very much appreciated it. It also did a very good job of critiquing some of the aspects of the activism community, which I think is also a very important thing to do. It did of course show the brilliant side of activism, which definitely does exist, and it's a very good thing to do, but it also talked about some of the ways that activism can be exclusionary to certain people, or the ways that you can have activism burn out by doing too much. And I really appreciated how all of these topics woven together. I wasn't that invested in the romantic storyline, but I did appreciate where the romantic storyline went. I thought it was very refreshing, and it talked about some very important things to do with romance that surprised me to see such a, you know, depth of this discussion in a young adult contemporary for some reason. So yes, it's also got a lot of, you know, black joy in it, black girl magic, and it's also got plus-sized main characters, you can see from the cover, so really did enjoy this one. I read The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy, and this one is a picture book, which is the most heartwarming thing that you can possibly read. You can read this from start to finish, or you can just jump in and read a few pages of it. I don't really have too much to say. It's just a very uplifting and hopeful book with some very nice, lovely messages that you could really read on a rainy day to help cheer you up, and they're truths that children can learn from, teenagers can learn from, adults and elderly people can learn from. It really just reaches all ages. I did a bit of a flip through in my vlog, so if you want to see what the artwork looks like, but I found this to be very magical and very beautiful. I read the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood, and this one follows Penelope, who was the wife of Odysseus in Greek mythology, and it's her getting to tell her own story, as well as the story of the maids who were killed in this story. However, this just wasn't for me whatsoever. I didn't like it. I feel like for a book where it's all about telling Penelope's story, it still felt like she had no autonomy whatsoever. It still felt like the male characters were definitely ruling her life and overcrowding the story. They got more time than I expected, and I didn't feel like it added anything to Penelope's character from what I've read about in the mythology. I still felt like it was the same thing almost, and I really wanted more from it. I was looking forward to the maids chapters and hearing from their point of view, but I feel like not enough was done with that to really intrigue me and to make me feel pulled into this book in any which way. So overall I was just very, very disappointed in this one. I don't think it was badly written or whatever, it just didn't intrigue me, didn't interest me, and didn't add any of the things that I was looking for from the synopsis. I read the play Pygmalion by Bernard Shaw, and I really, really enjoyed this play. This one follows Eliza, who is one of the lower class people who work on the streets of London, and these two men who are linguists decide that they have enough skill to teach this, you know, lower class girl to speak the Queen's English and pass her off as one of the gentry within 6 months. So they take up that challenge and they whisk her into their world, and it's what happens when that happens. And I really, really like this play. I think it does a lot of talking thematically and very, very well in terms of a play on classism, sexism, language, and it was so interesting to hear from the lower class characters because they definitely do have a voice in this one, and I appreciated that the upper class characters didn't get to overshadow them too much. I really liked Elise's character. She's got some backbone, and even though she's lower class, she won't let anybody tron on her or tell her what to do if she doesn't want to do it. But I thought it was interesting how these men who take on this challenge very much had an awareness of sexism and an awareness of classism and how it all works because they've studied it while they've studied language, and yet at the same time they still make mistakes and enact those issues, which I thought was just a brilliant showcasing of the duality of being aware of an issue but also not being able to put into practice combating that issue. At the end of this play, there is a dialogue scene between two characters that is just perfect. It talks about all of these topics and summarizes it in a very good way. I think this could be a very interesting one to study because reading the back of the book, you know, the afterword, it was talking about how some people read it as a romance and some people don't. I read it not as a romance. I didn't feel like there was anything romantic in the outcome whatsoever, and some people think she ends up with a certain person and some people think she ends up with no one or somebody else, and the ending is open enough to have all of those discussions, and I think it's very interesting to see what people think of the ending and what they believe the ending is. So, you know, I love a play that can make you think at the end of it, and I think it did everything so well. Can't wait to watch this performed. I also read A Mercy by Toni Morrison, and unfortunately this is one of those books that I didn't particularly like. In this one we are during slave times and there's this white man who doesn't want to own any slaves. However, he ends up acquiring some because of certain reasons. The slaves who live on his farm and work at his farm, but also his wife and him. It's about all of them, and it was just so confusing. I just couldn't understand what was going on. The point of view switches happened very, very fast and with very few feeling of, you know, differentiation between the characters, so I quickly got confused about who was who and what stories happened to which person. And even when I didn't feel the depth of their characters because this book is short and there just wasn't enough time with each character to fully develop them, to fully differentiate them from each other, and it was also confusing. And because of that, I feel like whatever message Morrison was trying to get across was very much lost in it being such a short book. I really would have wanted more, and it needed more development, and it just needed more of everything. I feel like the character who was the white man who didn't want to take on slaves could have been so interesting to learn more about, but of course we didn't really get that much time with him. And I don't know, I don't really see the point in this book after having finished it. I don't see the message and I don't feel a connection to any of the characters. I also read William Shakespeare's The Phantom Menace by Ian Douscher, and this is from the Star Wars Shakespeare series where he retells the Star Wars films but with Shakespearean language. It's pretty much that straightforward, but he also plays around with, you know, the style and the Shakespearean aspects of writing to match each of the characters. The illustrations in this one are gorgeous. Flip through exists in my vlogs, and I just had so much fun reading this book. The Phantom Menace is not even one of my favourite Star Wars films, but I just had to watch it after reading this one because this just made the story so enjoyable, and the way that it did, you know, Jabba the Hutt's language, and also the way that it, you know, had them coming in the scenes and off the scenes, it all just captivated the Star Wars feeling so well. Brilliant, fun book. If you're looking for something that is just pure fun and pure joy, and you're a fan of either Shakespeare, Star Wars or both, you're going to enjoy this one. For a non-fiction read, I read The Good Immigrant, which is edited by Nikesh Shukla, but it's actually essays from a whole range of authors. We've got East Asian authors, South Asian authors, Black authors, Muslim authors, and so many more talking about their experiences being an immigrant in Britain. And I really, really enjoyed this essay collection. I learned something new from every single essay. They've got their facts backed up, they've got their research done, but it's not only about research and facts, it's also their personal stories and their personal experiences with racism, with Islamophobia, with sexism, with homophobia, etc, etc. And I was absolutely stunned by some of the things that these people have had to face time and time again. It was also interesting to read about different people's careers choices, such as publishing, acting, and things that involve travel and how all of those things impacted their experiences. Also talking about their parents and the upper generation who were immigrants. It was great. It was a great collection. It was published in 2016, so of course that means any events of the last 5 years are not included, but nonetheless I think this is still incredibly relevant and still incredibly important reading. I also read Forgive Me, Leonard, Peacock by Matthew Quick, and Matthew Quick is the author of Silver Linings Playbook, which is one I did enjoy, so I hoped I would enjoy this one, and I did not enjoy this one whatsoever. So this one follows Leonard Peacock, and all we know about him is that he has a gun and he intends to shoot someone at school and then take his own life afterwards, and it's about that day that he plans to do this and why he's giving gifts to certain people before he does so. First thing that turned me off this book is at the very beginning it talks about some, you know, unpolitically correct words that shouldn't be said, and then it goes on to list all of them, and I just wish it didn't list them. I didn't think it was necessary, so that was the first thing that turned me off this book. But then overall I just didn't like the story. I didn't like how it handled some of the topics that it was handling. I didn't like where it went. I thought the book was incredibly predictable as well. I could see the lines that it was going into as it went into them. I also think that the characters were all horrible except for one character. They were all really horrible, and they were all very stereotypical and not very developed. It just all boiled down to it just not being a good book. I listened to this one on audiobook, on script, and I wasn't even a big fan of the narration, so that was another thing that was grating on me as I was reading. So yeah, this one is just a no from me. I don't really have very in-depth thoughts that I can give without spoilers on the reasons why I didn't like this one, but it didn't work for me. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima, and I thought this was an okay read. I don't read the synopsis because it gives way too much of the game away. All you really need to know is that it follows a young boy and his mother who is widowed, and she starts to have a romantic relationship with a sailor, and the son is not too happy with this, and it goes from there and spirals from there. I read this one pretty quickly. It's a very easy read, and it's very, you know, beautiful and atmospheric. The descriptions of the sea are woven into this book, and that was absolutely lovely to read, and the characters felt very real and fleshed out, and you can see how they were all so lonely even while they were interacting with each other, which I thought was a very interesting way of displaying this loneliness. I really like when they tackle the theme of loneliness but show how that loneliness does not only affect you while you are alone, and the loneliness drives these characters to do very different things, and it was just an interesting story to read. It was way darker than I expected, but I liked the way it ended and where it ended and how it leaves space for you to keep thinking about this book after you're finished. I love a good open ending, and I think I'm realising how much I can appreciate an open ending done well, which leaves you contemplating the book and having it on your mind much later as well. The next thing I listened to was Sounds Like Me by Sara Bareilles, and this is just her journey in life, her development as a music artist, and it's narrated and sung by her on script, and I really loved listening to this one. There's script link down below, you know, 63 days if you sign up through my link, and I listened to a little bit of her music but not a crazy amount. I'm not her biggest fan or anything, but I think it was a very interesting look at what she's been through, and I especially liked how honest and how open she was talking about struggling with her self-image before she became famous, and how much harder it was to deal with those self-image issues when she was put into the limelight because of her music. And it was also very interesting to hear about, you know, her creative journey as a musician. I am a creative artist myself in terms of writing and content creating, and I always will love hearing about creative people talking about their creative process and also their creative industry. So it was kind of the perfect audiobook for me because Sara Bareilles just has a way of being so honest, so open about all of this, and I really enjoyed hearing about her journey. Very good audiobook. Read Under Rose-Tainted Skies by Louise Gornall, and this one is a young adult contemporary which is own voices by the author for a character who has agoraphobia, OCD and anxiety, and she lives at home because she's agoraphobic and she doesn't get out of home, and a boy moves in next door, and it's about their interactions and what happens once they start to talk a little bit more. But I just want to make it very clear, this is not one of those mental health books where, you know, the boy falls in love next door and she wants to talk to this boy and eventually they become a romantic relationship and then she's completely cured of her mental illness. No, it's none of that. That is not the story. And I really appreciated seeing this very detailed representation for agoraphobia and OCD and anxiety. It also goes into another topic, content warning down below, but I won't say it here in case people don't want to know about it. Going in, I really liked all of the main characters. I really loved the mother and how much the mother cares about her daughter and how much the mother does for her daughter, but also, even though her mother is kind of a carer for her, they're also such good friends, and I love seeing that. I think we need to see more cases where you don't only have like a family member who fulfills a care role, but you still see how they are still friends throughout all of those ups and downs. I loved our main character. I think she was great. I really liked being in her mind and seeing her develop throughout the book, and of course Luke was a lovely love interest. Oh my goodness, all of the characters in here were so great. Loved the therapy representation again, a very positive spin on therapy, and the therapist was absolutely amazing. I think even though this book takes place within a home because she's agoraphobic and there's very few characters because she interacts with very few people, it still did a very good job of keeping me engaged throughout the whole thing, and it was paced so well. The ending was a bit too fast for my liking, but I was still satisfied when I finished it, and this book was so good it had me up late at night reading, so really recommend this. I read The Creature Keeper by Damaris Young, which is a middle grade novel about a young girl who takes on a job at a Diaspire estate where there are all these magical animals living. However, when she goes there and she learns about the animals, she starts to think, is it right that these animals are kept in this way? And I really like this middle grade. It was a very quick read, absolutely flew through it. If you are an animal lover, you're going to enjoy this one even more than me. I wasn't the particular audience for this book because I'm not the hugest animal lover, but I still really liked how it was for young audiences but tackled the themes of animal abuse very well, but not only straightforward obvious animal abuse, but also how animal enclosures and keeping animals in certain spaces can also be a form of abuse to them because it's not how they're supposed to live. Handled that very well. The friendship in this one was very nice and our main character was really lovely. So all in all, it was a good book. I'm not the age audience. I think younger children will enjoy this more and animal lovers will enjoy this more. I read The Deep Blue Between by Ayesha Haruna Atta. This one is a young adult novel where we follow these two twins. They're born in Africa but they get separated once their village has been attacked, and one of them ends up in gold clothes and one of them ends up in Brazil. But even though they are separated, they have these shared dreams of water, and it's about them trying to find each other, and it continues on from there. Mostly I felt indifferent to this book. I don't have a very strong opinion. I didn't connect to the characters, but I didn't dislike them. The plot was happening, but I wasn't very invested. But the only thing I can truly say is that I didn't love where the themes ended up, but I did like the themes that it discussed, so again it balances out at indifference. Some of the themes that it touches on here are family responsibility and what it means to be part of a family, what are your duties as part of a family. At the same time, it also talks a lot about religion. One of the characters in particular comes across a lot of different religions who are doing things very differently, and she's kind of caught up in all of these religions. What should she believe, what shouldn't she believe? And then the other character also comes in contact with a different kind of religion, and I appreciate it, seeing such a range of religions in this book and seeing them all kind of interact and exist in the same spaces. But at the same time, I wasn't the biggest fan of where the family relationship duty storyline ended. I just feel like it's not a message that I'm very much about in terms of what it means to be part of a family, so I was a bit disappointed in the end, and I expected a certain moment to be quite climactic and it wasn't, so that was a miss of its mark for me. All in all, I don't not recommend this. I don't really recommend it either. It's up to you. Fatlip by Hannah O'Donnell, and this one is a short story collection that's kind of autobiographical, kind of fictional too, and it's just about experiences that she has had with love, but not just romantic love, in terms of family love and friendship love, and I really did enjoy this collection. I just thought it was a very good time. They were very honest and very raw, and I appreciated that, and because of that there's definitely something in here that you can relate to. I especially liked one of the last stories, which I found to be absolutely hilarious, but there's other moments in this where my heart felt warm, and there were other moments in this where I wanted to smile, but there were also moments that were quite emotional too. It's just a very, very good collection, and it's worth your time, worth reading. There you have it. I'm going to take a bit of a break before I film the next wrap up. Please let me know in the comment section down below, have you read any of these books, and because this section had a lot of my least favourites in it, what was your least favourite read of April? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!